In Suffolk, East Anglia, the bulge of England, the derriere of the British Isles, there is a small fishing village called Orford. Along the seashore at Orford, there are rows and rows of tiny fishermen's huts. The huts have been there for years and years, centuries and centuries, and if you go back, way back in time, you can still hear the fishermen laughing and rejoicing, because a new castle keep has been built by the king, and it is being looked after by Bartholomew de Glanville, widely regarded as the most remarkable castle keep of medieval times. It's rather put Orford on the fishing map. So the fishermen are going further and further out into the North Sea in search of their catch. One autumn morning, they went further than they had ever been before, out into the deep, deep grey sea, out past Orford Ness, the tiny island at the tip of the peninsula. They cast out their nets, and they sank deep, deep into the ocean. And as the fishermen pulled up their catch, they could feel the weight in the bottom of the nets. They started to whoop and cheer, for this was going to be a big catch. But instead of a fin of a silvery fish, there came a green tinged hand. And at the end of the hand, an arm covered in black, wiry hair. And at the end of the arm, there was a chest covered in thick, thick black hair. And at the top of the chest, a head, bald, the skin around the crown puckered and twisted. Covering the face of the wild man was a long black beard, streaked with colours from the sea, greens and barnacles. The fisherman bound the hands and the feet of the wild man and dragged him through the harbour, up to St. Bartholomew's Church. The wild man twisted on the end of the rope like a fish at the end of a line. Bartholomew de Glanville and the priest stood before the altar in the dark and echoey church. They presented the wild man with a Bible and a crucifix, but he cowered in the shadows, more interested in the light that was cast from the blue and green glass at the top of the church. He didn't say a word. The priest thrust the crucifix closer towards him, but the wild man just cowered back. They stretched the creature on the rack for 3 days. They stretched his feet and his hands away from each other. Wider and wider they went, until you could start to hear the bones crack, and the muscles began to tear from their holds. But still the wild man did not say a word. And after those 3 days, they took him up to the top of the castle keep and kept him in a cell 1 metre by 1 metre, with barely enough room to stand and turn around. They fed the wild man on raw fish, and he would squeeze the juices from the fish before gulping it down whole, eyes, scales and bones. Dignified visitors would come to the tower to spectate and look and examine at the wild man. After a few weeks, one particular visitor came and remarked, "He's looking a bit picky, a little bit lackluster. I don't know if it's worth the visit." Bartholomew de Glanville, in haste, strung 3 nets across the harbour. They were thick and strong and went right down to the bottom, down in the depths of the sea. They led the wild man to the harbour's edge, and he walked on shaking legs. He placed one foot in the harbour water and felt the liquid rehydrate his skin. He dived in and swam, luxuriating in the water, the grey, swirling water of the North Sea. He dove down to the bottom and came up again and dove down, taking shells from the base and throwing them to the crowds that now lined the wall of the harbour, fishermen, their wives and their children. He dove down one more time and didn't surface. Minutes passed, and the fishermen and their wives and their children began to look around at each other. Had he drowned? Was the Wild Man of Orford no more? The young fishermen began to remove their clothing, ready to jump in and try to save the creature or even see where he had gone. Jackets were removed and boots were taken off, and just as the strongest and youngest and most handsome young man had removed his boots and was ready to jump into the sea, a child pointed out into the waves. "Look!" he cried. And the crowd turned and looked to see a tiny black dot out in the waves. One could almost mistake it for one of those grey seals that sometimes swam round the bay. But it moved in a different way and was markedly different, and then an arm shot up above the black dot, and it disappeared into the waves. Nobody knows whether this creature was a mortal man or a fish pretending human form, or some evil spirit that had inhabited a drowned man's body. But it's certain that the fishermen of Orford still go out into the deep, deep North Sea, always in fear, or maybe in hope, that they will drag up a green-tinged hand in their net.